Hi and welcome. This week I'm going to be taking a look at a starting issue that affects a lot of Moto Guzzis, including my wife's Moto Guzzi Breva. Often when she goes to start the bike in the morning, you'll just get a click from the first few times that you press the starter button, which is a sign that the solenoid on the starter motor is not fully engaging enough so that the starter motor will turn over. Now that starter button is connected to the solenoid via a relay under the seat. It's the rearmost relay. Unfortunately, the positive to that relay actually is fed from a wire that travels all the way up to the ignition switch and then all the way back to the battery. There's no real need for it to actually go through the ignition switch because the starter button itself won't operate unless the ignition switch is on. So it just seems to be a bit of redundant wiring. And unfortunately, that causes a voltage drop at the relay, which in turn causes a voltage drop at the solenoid on the starter motor itself when you press the button. The solution that a lot of owners have taken is to actually run a wire direct from the battery to that relay, and they've sort of broken into the wiring and soldered the wire in or crimped it in somehow. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the connector from the connector block that collects onto the relay so that I can always reverse it at a later stage if I want to take the bike back to original. I'm also going to put a fuse in the line because I believe it's always good practice to have a fuse somewhere in the line when you're driving wiring on a motorcycle. Because even though that is just one short run from that relay to the starter motor, if there was a short, it is possible that you could melt the wiring if you were unaware that there was a fault with it. So to me, it's just a prudent practice to put a fuse in the line. So the first thing I'll do is I'll disconnect that relay and we'll have a look at the wiring. Just ignore my cable ties here. These aren't the original relays and the replacements didn't fit into the little rubber holders that the original relays fitted in. So we just take that off and disconnect the plug, put that to one side. Now the wire we're interested in is this orange wire with a faint red stripe. It's right next to that mauve or magenta wire there. Now I've already removed this connector. They are actually rather hard to get out. They've got a little barb on the top there so that when it slides into the connector, it locks in. And you can push a jeweler's screwdriver down the top side here to release that clip. But it can take a bit of time to do. I'm just going to insulate that to put it aside so that I can restore the wiring at a later date if I want to. And what I'm going to do now is make up a wire that goes from the positive of the battery to a new connector which will slide into this switch block. This is what I'm going to be using. This actually came from an old Oxford heated grips set that I took off the Breva. So it's already got a connector on this end to connect to the battery. There's an inline fuse here. I've upped it from a 5 amp to a 10 amp, which is the same as the auxiliary circuit that the starter's on. And all I need to do is crimp on a new connector, which I have here, on this end so that I can slide that into the connector block on the bike, bolt that onto the battery, and the job will be complete. Now I've already disconnected the earth here, so if I have any issues connecting the positive, I won't short anything out. Now the positive for the bike is actually underneath this frame rail here, but these Motobat batteries have 2 positive terminals and 2 negative terminals, so I'm just going to take this little plastic plug out and I'll connect the new one here so I don't actually have to take the battery right out of the bike. Now I'll just feed this connector back into this connector block into the appropriate place until it locks in. It's locked in. Fit the relay. Now I'll just get some heat shrink to fix that. So here we have the wiring, at this end the battery, through the fuse to the relay. And the original wire now has some heat shrink on it, so I can actually put it back the way it was if I so desired sometime in the future. I've reconnected the earth, and now it's time to give the bike a bit of a test start just to see how it works. Moment of truth. Started perfectly that time, no dreaded click, so that's the problem solved. Well, I hope you got some value out of that. I know my wife will certainly appreciate not having to push the starter button several times to get the bike going in the morning or when she's on her way home from work. Well, that's it for this particular video, and I'll catch you next time.